Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into the fascinating and, honestly, pretty profound theological concepts of Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, verse 9, and its accompanying commentary. We are going to unpack an ancient text's ultimate path to spiritual liberation. So get ready, because we're exploring some incredible ideas about existence, the universe, and the pursuit of absolute spiritual perfection.
Let's start by looking at a universal human desire that's highlighted right at the core of our source text: breaking free from material bondage in this endless cycle of rebirth. For millennia, philosophical and spiritual traditions have grappled with this exact question. Like, are we just doomed to repeat the material experience endlessly, or is there an actual, definitive exit strategy? Well, the commentary we're looking at today presents a very specific, uncompromising answer to whether someone can permanently escape this cycle.
To understand exactly how the text tackles this massive existential problem, we need to look at the core verse. Section 1. Escaping the cycle.
Okay, let's really dive into this foundational quote from the Bhagavad Gita. The text here is making an absolutely staggering claim. It says that simply understanding the divine, transcendental nature of the Lord's appearance and activities is the exact key to achieving an eternal abode. Notice what it promises here. You do not take birth again in this material world. The text argues that whoever truly grasps this, not just on a superficial level, but profoundly, is instantly liberated upon leaving their physical body. It frames this kind of understanding as the ultimate exit door from material existence.
But the commentary makes sure to tell us it's not quite that simple. Section 2, the promise of liberation. So the text is very quick to clarify that freeing the living entity from material bondage isn't just a quick fix. It's definitely not a weekend project. The commentary explicitly states that this is not an easy process at all. For many seekers, it requires continuous effort across many births, demanding immense trouble and struggle along the way. And this stark reality really sets the stage for the drastically different paths that people take to try and achieve this liberation. It implies that because the goal is so incredibly high, the methodology to get there has to be absolutely precise.
This brings us to a huge contrast in the source material between two very different approaches. Section 3, the two paths compared.
Now, before we can accurately compare these two paths, we absolutely have to define this crucial Sanskrit term from the text, Brahma Jyotir. The commentary describes this as the impersonal spiritual effulgence, or the energy of the Lord. And this is the destination that certain practitioners, who the text refers to specifically as yogis and impersonalists, seek to merge into. Basically, they view ultimate liberation as becoming one with this formless, spiritual light. However, and this is a major distinction, the text classifies this as only a partial type of liberation.
Just look at these approaches side by side. The contrast is night and day. On the left, we've got the yogis and impersonalists. The text claims their path requires much trouble over many births, only results in that partial liberation we just talked about by merging into the Brahma Jyoti, and, crucially, carries the very real risk of falling right back into the material world. But on the right, we have the path of the devotee. By simply understanding the transcendental nature of the Lord, the text argues the devotee achieves full, guaranteed liberation, immediately attaining the eternal abode with zero risk of returning. So the source is strongly elevating the path of the devotee over the intellectual path of the impersonalist.
To back up this hierarchy, the commentary brings in a powerful quote from Vedic literature, specifically the Purushabodhini Upanishad. It asserts that God has many transcendental forms, but remains one and the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is key because it brilliantly illustrates a major point. These forms exist specifically for relationships with unalloyed devotees. The author argues that this concept, a single supreme person manifesting in countless forms for relationship, is a fact you have to understand with deep conviction, even though, as the text bluntly claims, it is totally incomprehensible to mundane scholars and empiric philosophers.
So, why does pure intellect fail to grasp this? The text gives us an unforgettable metaphor. Section 4, the honey bottle metaphor.
Picture this for a second. The text argues that trying to understand salvation, or trying to interpret the Bhagavad Gita merely through the lens of mundane scholarship, is exactly like licking the outer surface of a glass bottle of honey. You look kind of silly, you can describe the color of the honey, you can hold the jar, but you never actually get a single drop of the sweetness inside. The source uses this super vivid metaphor to assert that without faith and devotion, purely intellectual analysis of spiritual texts leaves you entirely on the outside looking in.
So this metaphor builds into a really firm critique of purely intellectual approaches. According to the text, scholarship has severe limits. Intellectuals cannot attain salvation through intellect alone. In fact, the text claims they actually remain in the mode of ignorance. And sure, while they might assume very important, highly respected roles here in the material world, they are not necessarily eligible for liberation. The text actually makes the bold, almost provocative claim that such puffed-up, mundane scholars ultimately have to wait for the causeless mercy of a faithful devotee to actually make any real spiritual progress.
Right, so if intellectual speculation is just licking the glass jar, how do we actually open it and taste the honey? Section 5. Achieving the ultimate perfection. The commentary outlines these 3 precise steps, which is basically a blueprint for the highest perfectional stage. Step 1 is straightforward. Understand the Lord as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Step 2 is where the text really diverges from the scholars. You must accept this truth firmly, not through endless philosophical speculation, but on the absolute strength of faith and the authority of the Vedas. And if you do this, step 3 follows automatically. According to the commentary, replacing speculation with faithful acceptance is guaranteed to instantly grant you liberation from birth and death, ensuring your entrance right into the transcendental association of the Lord.
We definitely couldn't wrap up this explainer without highlighting how the source material reinforces this blueprint with a totally uncompromising Vedic assertion from the Shvetasvatar Upanishad. Look at that phrasing. There is no other way to achieve this perfection. The text insists that knowing the Lord as the Supreme Personality is the sole, non-alternative method for true liberation. It literally leaves zero room for debate, stating that without this specific, faithful understanding, ultimate salvation remains permanently out of reach.
So as we conclude our breakdown of this incredibly powerful text, I want you to consider this. Based on the stark contrast the commentary presents between licking the outside of the honey jar and actually opening it up, how do you approach the ultimate search for truth? Will you rely solely on empiric scholarship or explore the path of faith? The Bhagavad Gita 4.9 draws a very clear line in the sand regarding which path leads to true freedom. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.